Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 here on Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Kenny McBride. Our first story tonight is the tragic story of 39 people found dead inside a lorry on an industrial estate in Essex. A 25-year-old driver from Northern Ireland has already been arrested on suspicion of murder. The victims were found in the lorry early this morning on the Waterglade Industrial Park in Grays, where police have said that all of the victims were adults, apart from one teenager. The force initially said the lorry was believed to be from Bulgaria, but had entered the country at Holyhead, the Welsh port town serving Ireland. However, police have since said that while the cab did come from Ireland, the police have said that the trailer came from Zeebrugge to Purfleet, leaving port just an hour or so before the police and ambulance services were notified. The Bulgarian Prime Minister Boyko Borisov has just said that the truck was registered in Bulgaria in 2017 by an Irish woman, but then left the country and never returned. So at the moment it is unclear where the truck had actually originally come from. Chief Superintendent Andrew Mariner of Essex Police said, "This is a tragic incident where a large number of people have lost their lives. Our inquiries are ongoing to establish what has happened. We are in the process of identifying the victims. However, I anticipate that this could be a lengthy process." We have arrested the lorry driver in connection with the incident, who remains in police custody as our inquiries continue. I appreciate that the cordon is going to disrupt the activity of local businesses in the area, and we will work to ensure that disruption is kept as short as possible. We are working with Thurrock Council to mitigate against any impact of our investigation. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, said that Home Office immigration officials were working closely with the police to establish what had happened, while the National Crime Agency, which has a remit to investigate organised immigration crime as well as human trafficking, said it was looking into whether organised crime groups might have played a role in the tragedy. Irish police, meanwhile, have said they are monitoring the developing investigation and will provide every assistance possible. Leo Varadkar, the Irish Prime Minister, has told Parliament, "Obviously, we will need to get more information. It is a real, terrible and human tragedy, and we'll carry out any investigations that are necessary if it's established that the truck did pass through Ireland." A really tragic story, and obviously it's going to be a real challenge to identify those bodies and track down where they came from. We will obviously update you if we get any more news on that. Meanwhile, back in Scotland, Ian Murray, the Labour MP with the largest majority in Scotland, faces a battle to remain its candidate for Edinburgh South after Unite members triggered a reselection contest. Murray is thought to be the only one of Labour's 7 MPs in Scotland to face a selection contest after Unite accused him of systematically undermining party leaders and attacking the union directly. Murray has clashed with Len McCluskey, Unite's General Secretary, repeatedly over Corbyn's leadership, the behaviour of the union itself, and on party policy over Brexit. Murray, of course, is the leader of the People's Vote campaign for a second EU referendum, and that has caused conflict with the union. Murray has also clashed with Pat Rafferty, the regional organiser for Unite Scotland, attacking the union for its clumsy strategy of signing up its members as Labour affiliate members to swing the Scottish Party leadership contest in 2017. A Unite Scotland spokesman said this decision was taken by Unite members following consultation with the relevant committees and branches of the union under our democratic processes. Our members are clearly concerned that Ian Murray has consistently undermined the Labour leadership in Scotland and at Westminster, and has on occasion attacked our union. No MP is entitled to their seat. It is for Mr Murray to now demonstrate why Unite members in Edinburgh South should return him as their representative. Murray responded yesterday that he was disappointed Unite was prioritising his deselection while he was fighting to build a cross-party coalition to stop Brexit. My constituents are my priority, and I won't be distracted from fighting for them," he said. There have been long-running tensions in Murray's constituency party between his supporters and pro-Corbyn members, with Corbyn activists packing out local meetings in the past. His allies believe Murray's position is secure, but many centrist members in Edinburgh have left the party, including Murray's close ally and friend Kezia Dugdale, who until recently was the leader of the party in Scotland. At Westminster, the Health and Social Care Committee has published a report recommending that some drug offences should be decriminalised in the UK to stem the rising number of drug-related deaths. The committee, which is chaired by the Liberal Democrat Sarah Wollaston, said drug possession for personal use should be a civil rather than a criminal matter, and that a consultation on decriminalisation should be launched and significant investment directed into treatment services as a matter of urgency. The recommendations were, unsurprisingly, broadly backed by campaigners and medical experts, but the government moved swiftly to say it had no plans to decriminalise drug possession. Wollaston said recommendations put forward in this report propose changes to drugs policy that are desperately needed to prevent thousands of deaths. Avoidable drug deaths are increasing year on year across the UK, but there has been a failure to act on the evidence. The government instead should look at the system used in Portugal, where possession of all drugs has been decriminalised, according to the report. Adding such a move would save money from the criminal justice system and allow for more investment in treatment. The Office for National Statistics reported that 4,359 deaths from drug poisoning were recorded in England and Wales in 2018, the highest since records began in 1993. Scotland's drug-related death toll also hit a record high of 1,187, according to data released in July, which would put the country on par with the US in per capita terms, although it should be noted that the figures are counted in a slightly different way in Scotland, which does make the Scottish figure look artificially slightly higher. The committee said that decriminalisation could save lives, as it called for sufficient funding for alternative approaches, such as a pilot of drug consumption rooms, which are supervised healthcare facilities where users can take drugs in safer conditions. This, of course, was something that the Scottish Government proposed and appealed to the Westminster Government to change the rules on to set up such consumption rooms in Glasgow, but as this report obviously suggests, the government is dead set against that idea. Niamh Eastwood, the ex-executive director of drug charity Release, said the committee is absolutely right to conclude that current UK drug policy is failing, with record levels of drug-related deaths, the highest for the 7th year in a row, with 11 people dying every day. The recommendations of this report must be urgently implemented to reduce these avoidable deaths. Meanwhile, Professor David Nutt, the government's former chief drug misuse advisor, who was sacked a decade ago for claiming, with some evidence, that ecstasy and LSD were less dangerous than alcohol, said this is not the first time parliamentary committees have recommended major changes to the drug and alcohol laws. Let's hope that this one is the last and that the government take heed of this report. For this to happen, the government must accept the vast body of evidence that they have ignored for decades and make the recommended changes. It is now time to take decision-making on drugs out of petty party politics and into health. James Nichols, the chief executive of Transform Drug Policy Foundation, said the UK, particularly Scotland, is gripped by a drug-related deaths crisis. The government must act on this report as a matter of life or death. We also support the call for decriminalisation of people in possession of drugs. Moving drugs to the Department of Health and establishing harm reduction at the heart of UK drug policy is crucial if we are to save lives. However, if we are to seriously get drugs under control, we must legalise and regulate their supply, as well as decriminalising people who use them. A government spokesperson commented that it had no plans for decriminalisation, saying the decriminalisation of drug possession in the UK would not eliminate the crime committed by the illicit trade, nor would it address the harms associated with drug dependence and the misery that this can cause to families and communities. And certainly it's true that if only decriminalisation took place, not full legalisation, then there would still be an illicit trade, which could cause problems. However, all the evidence really shows that harm reduction to users would be massively reduced as a result. The SNP has commented on this, unsurprisingly. The SNP has demanded that drug policy be devolved in order to pursue life-saving approaches such as those safe injecting rooms, but has been met with chilling indifference from the UK government. MP Tommy Shepherd said, "This report makes clear that the UK government's drug policy is simply not fit for purpose, with successive UK governments, both Labour and Tory, utterly failing the people who need most help. The Scottish Government has set out the right approach, addressing the harms of drugs as a public health issue instead of treating drug users as criminals. Drug policy remains reserved to Westminster, and Tory ministers have consistently blocked plans to take vital action, dismissed overwhelming evidence in favour of overdose prevention facilities, and displayed chilling indifference towards Scotland's drugs emergency. It's plain to see that the current system is not adequately tackling the problems. We need a bold and innovative approach to tackle the tragedy of drug deaths, and the UK Government must urgently wake up to the fact. If Westminster will not act to tackle problem drug use, then it must devolve the powers to the Scottish Parliament so the SNP Government can take the action needed to tackle addiction, reduce health risks, and take the vital steps to tackle the drug-related deaths and harm in Scotland. Meanwhile, on the islands, Ofgem has said that it is unable to approve a proposal by Scottish and Southern Energy Networks to build a 600 megawatt subsea electricity transmission link from Shetland to mainland Scotland. The cable would connect planned wind farm projects on Shetland with the mainland, allowing them to export electricity to the rest of Great Britain. In March of this year, Ofgem said that it was minded to approve the estimated £709 million link. The proposal from SSEN for a 600 megawatt transmission link was based on the largest planned project, the Viking Energy wind farm, securing subsidies through the UK Government's autumn Contracts for Difference auction. The award of these subsidies would have provided confidence that the wind farm is likely to progress and protection for consumers from the risk of paying for an underutilised transmission link to Shetland. However, the wind farm was not successful in securing these subsidies in last month's auction, and for that reason, Ofgem has felt that the link is not viable. For the Western Isles, Ofgem has said that it's unable to approve the SSEN proposal to build a 600 megawatt transmission link to connect the Western Isles to mainland Scotland. In March of this year, Ofgem said it was not minded to approve that one, which would cost around £623 million, but would approve a revised submission for a 450 megawatt link, or consider the case for a 600 megawatt link if consumers were more appropriately protected from the risk of paying for an oversized link. The proposal from SSEN for a 600 megawatt transmission link was based on the two largest projects, both formerly part of the Lewis Wind Power project, securing subsidies in that same auction. Only one of those projects was successful, though, which increases the risk that consumers would end up paying for a significantly underutilised transmission link. Ofgem is committed to helping deliver the most effective and fastest route to a net zero emissions economy at the lowest cost to consumers. It encourages SSEN to submit revised proposals for both these links, including establishing more certainty that these wind farm projects will go ahead. And Ofgem is working with SSEN to secure realistic proposals from them and will endeavour to consider those as soon as possible. As we know, that's all based on statements from Ofgem. We do know, of course, this is a long-standing need, particularly to the Northern Islands, where wind power is over-generating as we speak, and that generation is currently going to waste because of the lack of a suitable transmission cable. So we do hope that some revision can be made to this and that the appropriate money can be put in place to make this happen. Meanwhile, Brexit, which thankfully is not our top story today, for once. EU leaders will consider Britain's request for a Brexit delay today and are likely to move quickly to extend the deadline from October the 31st to some point in the future, probably the end of January, with as soon as possible. The European Council President Donald Tusk said on Twitter that he had recommended late last night that EU leaders should back a delay. Boris Johnson was forced by Parliament, of course, to ask for a 3-month delay, but there is still a chance that some EU countries, especially France, could demand a shorter extension. Last night, of course, we saw the bill paused in Parliament after the programme motion to enable it to pass through Parliament in just 3 days was rejected by Parliament. The one EU diplomat said the most likely outcome is an extension until January 31st, as requested by London, with the possibility of Britain getting out earlier, provided it finishes its legal processes. Basically, as soon as Britain is ready itself, it can go. The one big uncertainty is whether France will agree. A diplomatic source said on Tuesday that Paris was ready to grant an additional few days to facilitate the parliamentary vote, but was opposed to any extension beyond that. An extension has to be agreed unanimously among the 27 remaining member states of the EU. They have already agreed twice to postpone Brexit from the original deadline of March 29th in this year, and both times the French government resisted quite strongly, but eventually did agree. A second EU official said that ambassadors of the EU 27 would meet in Brussels late today to consider Tusk's recommendation and his proposal to seek their consensus by written procedure. An agreement is not thought to be likely to be reached today, though, and it's possible that some leaders will request an emergency summit on Brussels to decide the matter on Friday. Meanwhile, in Britain, Johnson has said that he will push for a new election, campaigning on a platform to get Brexit done if the EU agrees the full 3 months delay. If Parliament's delay is agreed by Brussels, then the only way the country can move on is with an election, a source at Downing Street said. Johnson, of course, can't call an election without support from other parties in Parliament, and at the moment it's not clear that he will get that without certainty that no deal is not possible. Meanwhile, today Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn met but have failed to agree a timetable for pressing ahead with the bill. At the meeting, Corbyn was accompanied by Seamus Milne and Johnson by Dominic Cumming, as well as the two parties' respective chief whips. Of course, many within Whitehall and elsewhere blame Seamus Milne and Dominic Cummings for much of the problems that their leaders are having. Neither are even well liked within their own parties. A Labour spokesperson said Jeremy Corbyn reiterated Labour's offer to the Prime Minister to agree a reasonable timetable to debate, scrutinise and amend the withdrawal agreement bill, and restated that Labour will support a general election when the threat of a no-deal crash-out is off the table. But Downing Street sources claimed Corbyn made clear he has no policy except more delays and to spend 2020 having referendums. I rather think he probably only wants one, if any. But that's clearly the Downing Street spin as they do prepare for an election. Corbyn used all of his questions at PMQs today to ask Johnson about elements of the withdrawal agreement bill, including standards for environmental, consumer and workers' rights, and the continued inclusion of Northern Ireland in elements of the EU's customs union. After Johnson incorrectly said that there would be no checks between Northern Ireland and Great Britain, Corbyn accused him of not having properly read his own bill. The Prime Minister unlawfully prorogued Parliament. He said he would refuse to comply with the law. He threw Northern Ireland under a bus. He ripped up protections for workers' rights and environmental protections, lost every vote along the way, and tried to prevent genuine democratic scrutiny and debate, the Labour leader said. Even worse than that, he's not that familiar with it. And the SNP has a press release today as well, commenting on a new analysis by the Fraser of Allender Institute showing that Brexit has already cost the Scottish economy £3 billion. SNP MSP Tom Arthur said, Scotland is already paying a heavy price for Brexit. Businesses are putting off investment and Boris Johnson's damaging deal fails to offer a solution. Tory plans will see tens of thousands of jobs lost, with the least well-off hit the hardest. And the Tories have admitted that their deal would put Scotland at a competitive disadvantage compared to Northern Ireland. We need a way out of this mess, and a general election is an opportunity to boot Boris Johnson out of office and stop the Tories from saddling Scotland with their damaging plans. It becomes increasingly clear that Scotland faces a clear choice of two futures: more chaos and economic harm with the Tories as we crash out of the EU, or seizing the opportunity to build a fairer, more prosperous country with the full powers of independence. Meanwhile, Brendan O'Hara MP, again from the SNP, has slammed Boris Johnson for ignoring Scotland's fishing industry in his Brexit deal. which will give Northern Ireland's fishing sector, who fish in the same waters, access to the single market and customs union, but not Scotland's. Mr O'Hara pointed out at Prime Minister's questions today that the Brexit deal negotiated by Boris Johnson will give Northern Ireland's seafood producers a better deal than seafood producers in his constituency of Argyll and Bute, and the rest of Scotland, for exactly the same catch from exactly the same waters due to the loophole. The SNP has said that the loophole could see Scottish fishing vessels having their port of registration in Northern Ireland, land their catch there, and then have it transported to the Republic of Ireland without undergoing processing, which could see it exempted from EU customs duties, which would risk having a huge negative impact on Scottish ports and the wider fishing sector. Brendan O'Hara said, "This Brexit deal will allow Northern Ireland's fishing industry continued access to the single market and customs union, but deal a devastating blow to Scotland's, despite both countries voting overwhelmingly to remain in the EU and therefore the single market and customs union." Boris Johnson seems quite content to see thousands of jobs threatened and allow Scotland's fishing sector to be one of the hardest hit sectors in the whole of the UK. Scotland is the only country of all 4 UK nations to get none of what it voted for, nor to have any say in the Brexit process. This deal lays bare the fact that the UK government has completely ignored Scotland and its needs every step of the way. Whatever happens now, it is clearer than ever that the best future for Scotland is an equal, independent European nation, and the people of Scotland must be given that choice. And finally, Ian Blackford has commented that Boris Johnson cannot be trusted to respect devolution after he falsely claimed the Scottish Government has no role in approving this deal, despite legislative consent being required under the current devolution settlement. At PMQs today, Ian Blackford called on the Prime Minister to confirm the Tory government will not seek to force through the EU withdrawal bill unless consent is given by the Scottish Parliament, a requirement that is accepted by the UK government itself in the explanatory notes on the withdrawal agreement bill. Ian Blackford said Boris Johnson's arrogant and dismissive comments about the Scottish Parliament show the utter contempt with which the Tories regard Scotland. Scotland has been ignored throughout the Brexit process, and now, alone of all UK nations, we face being taken out of the EU single market and customs union against our will and with no say. The UK government must urgently clarify that Boris Johnson will not roll back devolution by forcing the Tory Brexit bill through without the consent of the Scottish Parliament. By falsely claiming the Scottish Parliament has no role in approving the EU withdrawal bill, the Tory Prime Minister is trampling all over Scotland's devolution settlement, unilaterally abolishing the Sewell Convention and reneging on commitments previously given by his own government. It is clear Boris Johnson cannot be trusted to respect devolution. He is instead ripping the devolution settlement to shreds. The UK government must make clear that Boris Johnson was wrong and give a cast-iron guarantee that it will not seek to force through this appalling Brexit deal unless consent is given by the Scottish Parliament. Brexit has shown beyond doubt that Scotland will never be treated as an equal partner in the UK. Whatever happens now, it is clearer than ever that the best future for Scotland is as an equal, independent European nation, and the people of Scotland must be given that choice. And meanwhile, the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, has been in London today with the Welsh First Minister, Mark Drakeford. We did report briefly on the letter that they have sent to the Prime Minister last night, essentially saying that neither the Welsh Assembly nor the Scottish Parliament expects to give legislative consent to the withdrawal agreement, and that therefore the withdrawal agreement bill should not be able to pass. However, as we've seen throughout the Brexit process, the British government at this time seems highly unwilling to deal with the devolved administrations and to properly respect the Sewell Convention. So we will have to see what happens with respect to that. I've just been handed a little bit more about this, some mention of the First Minister's speech. She said, she told the conference that she was speaking at today that the UK would not leave. It was almost certain the UK would not leave the EU on the 31st of October, but added that the reprieve is currently only a temporary one. Mr. Drakeford echoed her sentiments and warned that the withdrawal agreement bill may be in limbo or in purgatory, but was not yet dead. Nicola Sturgeon said, "I want to see a general election. I would be very happy to see that general election before Christmas, but the circumstances of that have to be such that it doesn't open the risk of a no-deal Brexit. And I think all responsible opposition MPs who want to see an election have a duty to make sure that that is the case." The Welsh First Minister said, "I've always been agnostic on whether a general election or a referendum is the best way to get this decision put back in the hands of the people, but I've never been anything but clear that that should be the end objective." He added, "What I want to see in this decision is this decision put back in the hands of the people who made it in the first place. If a referendum comes our way, we should grab it with both hands. If a general election comes our way first, I absolutely want a general election." And, well, we will see. It does seem that that is now what's most likely to happen, but exactly when and how is yet to be agreed. Meanwhile, in the United States, a top Pentagon official who oversees policy on Ukraine and Russia is expected to testify on Wednesday before the US House of Representatives panels, leading an impeachment inquiry of Republican President Donald Trump. The testimony of Laura Cooper, a key career official, has been sought by lawmakers interested in her knowledge of alleged efforts by Trump to withhold hundreds of millions of dollars in aid to Ukraine until its president committed to investigating Joe Biden, the former vice president who's at the moment leading in the polls to become the Democratic presidential nominee. Cooper, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Russia, Ukraine and Eurasia, will appear voluntarily before the panels. The Pentagon has not blocked her from testifying. Excuse me. Cooper's testimony will follow that of William Taylor, the top US diplomat in Ukraine, who appeared before the inquiry yesterday. Taylor testified that he was told by Gordon Sondland, the US envoy to the European Union, that Trump had linked the release of aid to public declarations by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky that he would investigate Biden, his son Hunter Biden's tenure on the board of a Ukrainian energy company, and an already debunked theory that Ukraine meddled in the 2016 US presidential election. In an opening statement to lawmakers that the US media posted online, Taylor called the exchanges between Trump, his advisors, and Ukraine a rancorous story about whistleblowers, quid pro quos, corruption, and interference in elections. In August, an unnamed whistleblower reported having received information from multiple officials that Trump, in a July 25th phone call, had asked Zelensky to commit to investigating the Bidens before he would release $391 million in security assistance, approved by the US Congress to help combat Russian-backed separatists in eastern Ukraine. Federal election law prohibits candidates from accepting foreign help in an election. Taylor's testimony ran counter to Trump's contention that there was no quid pro quo or wrongdoing. The president has accused Democrats of trying to oust him to prevent his re-election. There was no quid pro quo, White House spokeswoman Stephanie Grisham said on Tuesday as Taylor wrapped up his testimony. Today was just more triple hearsay and selective leaks from the Democrats' politically motivated, closed-door, secretive hearings, she added. Also on Wednesday, 3 Democratic US senators sent a Freedom of Information Act request to US Attorney General William Barr, seeking any of his or Deputy Attorney General Jeremy Rosen's correspondence referencing members of the Trump administration with Ukrainian, Turkish, and other leaders. They also asked for all records of interactions between Justice Department officials and the governments of Ukraine and China about Trump's potential political opponents and any White House request to investigate the Bidens. And at the same time, Trump is facing New York prosecutors over his tax returns. Lawyers for Donald Trump and New York state prosecutors trying to obtain his tax returns were set to face off in a federal appeals court today. The case, to be argued before the Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in Manhattan, is one of several legal battles in which the president is seeking to shield his personal finances from scrutiny. In August, Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance, who's a Democrat, subpoenaed Trump's personal and corporate tax returns from 2011 to 2018 and other records from the president's longtime accounting firm, Mazars USA. The subpoena was part of a criminal probe into Trump and his family business. The scope of that probe is not publicly known. Trump then sued Vance's office in Manhattan Federal Court to block the subpoena, arguing that as a sitting president, he cannot be subject to criminal investigation. U.S. District Judge Victor Marrero threw out Trump's lawsuit on October the 7th, calling his claim that he was immune from investigation repugnant to the nation's governmental structure and constitutional values. Vance's investigation comes amid this impeachment inquiry that we discussed a moment ago, and investigations into Trump's finances by Democrats in the House of Representatives. Earlier this month, a federal appeals court in Washington backed an effort by the House Oversight Committee to obtain Trump's financial record from Mazars. The Second Circuit has put Marrero's October 7th order on hold until it considers the case. Vance's office has agreed not to enforce its subpoena for 10 days if the court rules in its favour, to allow Trump time to appeal to the US Supreme Court. The US Department of Justice has weighed in on the case, arguing that Vance must make a heightened and particularized showing that he needs the documents for his investigation. Though the department stopped short of saying Vance could not get the returns under any circumstances, it said it was unlikely he could demonstrate an immediate need for them because the US Constitution bars states from prosecuting a sitting president. So again, we will keep you updated on that. That story, we suspect, is going to run and run. And in Hong Kong, Hong Kong's legislature on Wednesday formally withdrew planned legislation that would have allowed extraditions to mainland China. This was the extradition treaty which sparked these protests to begin in the first place. These protests have been ongoing now for weeks, if not months. And it is thought that the move is unlikely to end those months of protests, as it meets just one of the 5 demands of the protesters. The rallying cry of the protesters has been 5 demands, not one less, meaning that the withdrawal of the bill makes no difference. Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam has said many times that the bill was as good as dead, and the other demands, including universal suffrage and an amnesty for all of those charged with rioting, were beyond her control. Protesters are also calling for her personally to stand down and for an independent inquiry into perceived police brutality during a long summer of running battles on the streets. There aren't any big differences between suspension and withdrawal of the bill. It's too little, too late, said 27-year-old protester Connie hours before the bill was withdrawn. There are still other demands the government needs to meet, especially the problem of police brutality. Police have responded to the protests with water cannon, tear gas, rubber bullets, and several live rounds. At least 2 people have been shot and are in serious conditions in hospital as a result of that those police shootings. Many more have been very seriously injured. Protesters are angry about what they see as Beijing encroaching on the former British colonies' one country, two systems formula enshrined during the handover in 1997, which permits the city-state of Hong Kong wide-ranging freedoms that are not available on the mainland, such as an independent judiciary. The extradition bill would have allowed defendants charged with serious crimes to be sent for trial abroad, including to Communist Party-controlled courts in China. The bill was seen as the latest move by Beijing to erode the freedoms that Hong Kongers have taken for granted. China has denied these claims and accuses foreign countries of fomenting trouble. A murder suspect whose case Lam had originally held up as showing the need for the extradition bill walked free today as the city's government squabbled with Taiwan over how to handle his potential voluntary surrender to authorities. And in Israel today, Benny Gantz, the leader of the Blue and White Party, has been invited by Israel's president to attempt to form a government after Benjamin Netanyahu failed to do so in the wake of the very close elections last month. Neither party, neither Blue and White nor the incumbent Likud party, came out with a clear win, and few expect that Gantz will be able to form a coalition with ease. He will have 28 days to try, after which Parliament can nominate a third candidate, although that appears extremely unlikely given how divided Israel's legislature is at the moment. If no contender can end the political crisis, the country will face an unprecedented third election in 1 year. President Reuven Rivlin is expected to officially mandate Gantz with the task of a ceremony at 8 p.m. at his residence, after which both men will give statements. So that meeting is happening as we speak. It would be the first time in more than a decade that anyone but Netanyahu would be given a chance to head the Israeli government. An end to the Netanyahu era would be an extraordinary moment in Israeli politics, as he has led the country for a record-breaking total of more than 13 years. The move does not necessarily end his political career, though, nor his chances of leading the country's next administration. However, the stalemate has wounded him, especially as he has become more deeply embroiled in 3 potential corruption cases. Israel's Attorney General is expected to announce in the coming weeks if he plans to indict. The charges only add pressure on Netanyahu to remain in high office, because if he remains in the role of Prime Minister, he will not be required to step down even if he is indicted. Netanyahu has denied all allegations. To block Gantz's chances, Netanyahu reportedly planned to meet with smaller right-wing and religious parties to agree not to side with the opposition leader. One route for Gantz to form a government would be to make a deal with Avigdor Lieberman, whose 8 seats afford him a kingmaker status, and to gain support from Arab parties. However, Lieberman, who is a staunch ultranationalist who is regularly accused of outright racism, has described Arab politicians as enemies. We will obviously bring you up to date if and when any government is made in Israel. It is a problem in Israel because it is a perfectly proportional system. If a party is not represented within the original 100 members but has sufficient votes to warrant a member, then members are added. And there are a wide range of parties in Israel. So forming coalitions is often a fairly difficult protest, and with both of the major parties not quite reaching the threshold they hoped, it has become very difficult to form any sort of stable coalition there. And finally, we are back in Scotland, where social programmes are to share £1.8 million in Scottish Government funding. Projects to mitigate inequality, tackle climate change and help put social enterprise products on high street shelves are to benefit from this £1.8 million of funding. Communities Secretary Aileen Campbell said the investment will help 21 programmes across the world deliver real change in their areas. The funding will also help address the global climate emergency by making £500,000 available through the Social Entrepreneurs Fund to offer repayable grants to social enterprises with a focus on environmental impact. Ms Campbell announced the funding while addressing the 2019 Social Enterprise World Forum in Ethiopia. With over 1,200 delegates from 40 countries in attendance, the internationally renowned conference brings together policymakers, social enterprise leaders, and the private sector to create new partnerships. Ms Campbell said, social enterprises at home and abroad make a valuable economic and social impact to our communities. This £1.8 million of funding will support projects working to bring about real change in their communities. From tackling poverty and inequality to supporting new skills and opportunities, these projects will help us develop a well-being economy where social and commercial goals go hand in hand to create a fairer, more equal society. The 2019 Social Enterprise World Forum provides an opportunity to showcase Scotland as a world-leading social enterprise nation, building upon our legacy as the 2018 host, as well as strengthening our cultural and trading links with Ethiopia. And that is, of course, excellent news. The move towards a well-being economy is something that we discussed in our conference special with Dr. Catherine Trebek. You can find that in part 3 of the coverage that we had. You'll be able to find that just by searching for it on YouTube. It was, for me, one of the most interesting interviews we got up there, talking about how Scotland can become a well-being economy. But that is all the news for tonight. I'm sorry we didn't have a guest tonight. Sometimes it's just very difficult to get somebody in at short notice. So we do apologise for that. I'm sure we will have somebody in joining Gordon on tomorrow night's show. In the meantime, I just want to say thank you for joining us, and to remind you, as always, that it is an expensive business making TV programmes. We've had a number of new people signing up recently. We encourage all of you, if you're able to, please do support us. broadcastingscotland.scot/register to sign up as a supporter. Your £5 a month can make all the difference in the type and the quality of programs that we can bring to you. We are ready to do more. We want to do more. All we're lacking is the money, and that's where you come in. Of course, programs will always remain free to view. That's one of our big commitments. We're not going to turn into a subscriber service. We want you to be able to enjoy these programs even if you can't afford to subscribe. But if you can afford to, then please do. It really does make all the difference. In the meantime, that's all for tonight from Scotland at 7 here on Broadcasting Scotland. We will be back at the same time tomorrow with Gordon. I've been Kenny McBride. Good night.